In Australia, over 40,000 men and women are currently behind bars. They've shattered countless lives, destroyed families. Some have been responsible for unspeakable violence.
There are just some people that are just evil of heart.
She's just scary. She's just real scary.
Some people are born with just that evil gene.
If you think you've seen and heard it all, you haven't. The truth of life behind bars in some of Australia's highest security prisons, told by the people who know.
It's dangerous on a daily basis. It's life-threatening.
Stabbings, hangings, people getting their heads stomped on.
If I was dangerous when I went in, I was more dangerous when I came out.
In this episode, a twisted fantasy becomes a gruesome reality.
The attack, by all accounts, was pretty swift.
Was a serial killer stopped?
If you can overcome all those inhibitions the first time, it becomes easier.
A loner stalks and murders a random stranger, then turns his prison into his own love shack.
He's sexually very, very busy in jail.
Then, an innocent child discarded like garbage.
His body was found in a suitcase dumped in a duck pond
after a mother's senseless rage.
She shook him to death.
And now she's a high-risk target, rotting in a small cell, hated by everyone. James Todd is often described as Victoria's most loathsome prisoner. His sexual deviant obsession with rape and snuff pornography led him to fulfill his sadistic fantasies on a young woman he'd been stalking through Melbourne city centre.
A monster cowers as he covers his face, but can no longer hide from what he's done. James Todd raped and strangled Eurydice Dixon as she walked home.
James Todd is now at Barwon Correctional Centre, serving a life sentence with no chance of parole for 35 years. Barwon is a high-risk maximum security prison located near Geelong, where they send the worst of the worst in Victoria. Crime podcaster Michelle Laurie knows this case well.
Eurydice Dixon was a very flamboyant, artistic young woman. She grew up in that kind of environment. Her mum had passed away. Her dad is still a very vibrant man, an artistic, creative guy. Eurydice was living with her dad and her brother in Melbourne.
Eurydice Dixon was an aspiring comedian with big dreams of seeing her name up in lights.
She ruined my tablecloth! Help!
She was also into the fantasy world of LARPing, which is medieval sword action role-playing.
So she was just a really vibrant, eccentric young woman.
Eurydice was doing a stand-up gig at the Highlander Bar in Melbourne city centre on the night of June 12, 2018. It would be her final performance.
Bit of a tendency to worry a lot. About things that I shouldn't worry about.
While 22-year-old Eurydice is living her dream life performing, 19-year-old hospitality student James Todd is hanging out in the city drinking with friends. He also has fantasies, but keeps them secret, very secret.
Nobody in his life understood the fantasy world that he was living in that little corner of his bedroom in his iPad.
It's no surprise he lives in a world of fantasy, because home life is chaotic.
He definitely grew up in a dysfunctional environment. It's a difficult situation that he's living in. His home is the home of hoarders. You can't get to the kitchen sink, you can't get to the stove, you can't get to the fridge, and no one has been able to in years. The only way you can cook in James Todd's home is there's one hot plate that's resting on the sink in the bathroom, and it's sitting next to a toilet that's clogged.
It was easy for him to hide away with his iPad and indulge his dark secrets.
By his own admission, from a young age, developed a darker and darker interest in really sexual depravity, and that is, you know, what he talked about as being rough sex, but then ultimately wanting to feel what it was like to actually kill someone, and he developed a fascination for that.
He had never talked about violence toward women. That was a very personal part of his life that no one else knew about.
Even his girlfriend had no inkling of his sadistic fantasies.
He had tried with his girlfriend to have some kind of role play around strangulation and around rough sex. She had said no, she wasn't interested, and he'd left it at that.
But Todd's fantasies had been bubbling up, and on June 12, 2018, he was ready to strike. After a number of drinks, Todd peels off from his friends and is hanging around Flinders Street Station. Around this time, Eurydice and her boyfriend are leaving the Highlander Bar in Flinders Lane.
It was here at the same intersection at 11 p.m. Eurydice Dixon said goodbye to her partner. She told him she was happy to walk home, and she set off toward Princes Park.
It's around here that the CCTV cameras pick up James Todd at the pedestrian crossing where he spots Eurydice.
He was attracted to her, she was his type, and he commenced following her. And obviously over that time would have just become more and more engrossed in his fantasy.
James had never had a criminal record, but tonight something feels different. He's fixated. He is never more than 20 seconds away from Eurydice.
He was really totally immersed in this fantasy, even though he had a normal life outside that, studying, had a girlfriend, had friends, but he had this, you know, hidden part of his life, which was so terrible, of course, so bleak. He did follow her every movement.
It was like real cat and mouse kind of stalking, but also the journey that she took went past a lot of pretty populated spots. Even though it was really late at night, they were wandering around university campuses and places where people were still up and about. The odd person was wandering around, so it wouldn't have struck her as odd. It's not unsurprising that she didn't really notice him.
Eurydice often does the 4.5 kilometre walk home alone after her gigs, checking in with her boyfriend by phone along the way.
And they were texting each other through the entire walk. You there yet? How far away are you? In that way that we have where we kind of feel safer if we're talking on the phone or if we're still in contact with someone. And of course the plan was, as soon as she got home, she would let him know that she was home safe and sound.
When Eurydice reaches Princes Park, she takes off her shoes, as she always does, so she can enjoy the grass underfoot for the final stages of her walk. At 12:03, she sends her boyfriend a text, thinking she's made it home safely. Princes Park is dark. There are no CCTV cameras. Little does she know, a killer is closing in.
He persisted over time and waited until she was in a dark place, waited until she got quite far into the park where he wouldn't be seen by people coming in royal parade before he did the attack. So, you know, he's motivated and he's planning the whole time, which is very eerie.
Coming up next, on Australia's most dangerous prisoners, the brutal murder that united a city.
We have invited you here to pay respect to Eurydice Dixon.
It's been almost an hour since 19-year-old James Todd began stalking 22-year-old Eurydice Dixon, following her 4.5 kilometres from the city centre. She still has 2 sports ovals to cross before she's safely home. She's texted her boyfriend to let him know.
The attack, by all accounts, was pretty swift. He grabbed her from behind and threw her to the ground and started sexually assaulting her. Eurydice was a tall young woman and no doubt fighting powerfully. She's fighting for her life. But he was big enough to overwhelm her and started sexually assaulting her, and then he started strangling her and killed her. And then he left. Then he left her there lying on the oval.
After the brutal kill, Todd buys a meat pie and coffee and goes home and watches porn of rape and strangulation.
He was watching porn that was very specifically about attacking and raping young women of Eurydice's age and who looked like Eurydice.
It was more about the fantasy about killing, what it was like to kill someone. It's very unusual for such a young person to be able to carry out that behavior.
Police soon identify the suspect.
Within hours, they had an image from CCTV cameras at the train station.
This shot of James Todd lurking in the city, following Eurydice for an hour, made headlines.
People saw him and he was on the news, and his friends said, you know, your picture's on the news, and then he turned himself in.
James Todd tried to hide his face, but he couldn't hide from justice or the bravery of a heartbroken father.
I am very glad there's a killer off the streets.
The public was outraged and devastated. 10,000 people attended a vigil in Princes Park to honour Eurydice.
We have invited you here to pay respect to Eurydice Dixon by showing love, solidarity and sharing a quiet reflection.
When sentencing in 2019, the judge was scathing.
Your actions were those of pure and unmitigated evil.
One positive is that he was apprehended so early. I think there'd be no doubt an ongoing risk of doing that, because I think if you can overcome all those inhibitions the first time, then it becomes easier.
Todd pleaded guilty to murder, rape, attempted rape, and sexual assault, after first lying about his involvement in the attack.
He's in protective custody. He's in the boneyard.
The boneyard is about as bad as you can get in jail. It's where they put all the sex offenders. It costs taxpayers around $540 a day to keep Todd locked up, almost $200,000 a year.
He is apparently just a very quiet prisoner. He's not a vulnerable prisoner, I guess because he's physically quite a big boy, but he's not argumentative either. He just sticks to himself. He's got his own little circle of people in there and, yeah, just sticks to himself, and he's doing his time.
He's doing his time in Barwon Prison, one of the most dangerous prisons in the country, where just recently assaults have risen dramatically. Prison is a dangerous place. Tensions run high, and things can boil over in a split second.
The thing that you notice when you first walk into prison, you can actually hear the doors clang shut behind you. You can hear the key turn. You think, it's chilling. There's the smell, which is pervasive. It's sort of unwashed humans and a bit of fear mixed in a few other bits and pieces. But the thing that's always curious about prisons is quite often the silence.
But when that silence is broken by violence, it can be deadly.
The reality is that we're dealing with the most complex, the most difficult, the most violent and challenging people on the face of the planet.
Jails are designed to control inmates and prevent violence. Despite the intensive training prison guards receive, it doesn't stop volatile events between inmates from flaring up.
We've been receiving reports from prisoners on there who feel fearful of their lives on a daily basis.
The volatility of the prisoner because of drugs, you don't know. special needs also a problem as well. So it's a more diverse community. Prisons have got to adapt to those needs. The last thing you want is people from different cultural backgrounds that have thousands of years of clashing. You don't want to put them in the same spot in the prison because you're going to have a blue. So it's a matter of risk management.
Violence has increased. 2 prisoners got into a fight over one snoring and the other watching television late at night.
Violence in prisons is triggered for any number of reasons, but gangs play a big role.
There's a whole mixed bag of gangs in prison, and they're all bloody dangerous because they're a unified force. And if it's an argument over turf, which most gang wars are about, it's testosterone, absolutely. We've got nothing better to do, let's bash the crap out of each other. That's not uncommon.
And kill each other, particularly in Goulburn Main Jail, which has the reputation as Australia's most dangerous prison yard.
Goulburn's been a place where they used to call it the killing fields. You know, it happens regularly. We've had murders at, you know, men's jails on a regular basis.
The one place that people, if there was going to be violence, would be in the gym. I think it was due to privacy issues. It was the only one place in the prison where there were no cameras, so obviously that would be the place that someone would be lured to if they were going to have the crap belted out of them.
It's not just the males who can put up a fight. The girls do too.
Well, in my section, most of the bashings and stabbings and stuff like that was just because you looked at them wrong, or you took the last spoon, or they want your milk, or, you know, over the most ridiculous things that here outside you wouldn't even bother about. I've seen a girl get stabbed about 4 times in the back just because she stole a pair of undies.
The biological warfare is the easiest, obviously. Someone said to me once, you know, the little milk cartons they get with their meals, you know, fill that up with your own excrement. That's pretty effective.
Up next, a callous, opportunistic murderer whose life inside is anything but violent. Life in prison is dangerous, violent, frightening, and volatile. Typically, most inmates dream of getting out, but not this man. Daniel Kelsall, who indecently assaulted and murdered 31-year-old Morgan Huxley after following him home from the pub and stabbing him 28 times. Kelsall may look bookish and nerdy, but don't be fooled by his passive demeanour. His looks hide a violent streak that would result in cold-blooded murder.
I had a small conversation to this guy, Morgan.
Yes, Morgan, yes. Called him No Shoes.
No, not to his face. No, that's what.
No, sorry, but that's what you said.
The name that I had for the person was No Shoes.
No Shoes.
Kelsall was just 20 years old at the time.
I had no idea where the murder happened or who it happened to. I didn't even know where the guy went.
Daniel Kelsall is now serving a 40-year, 3-month sentence with a non-parole period of 30 years and 3 months. He's currently in the Cessnock Correctional Complex, about 2 hours' drive north of Sydney. This sprawling centre houses Australia's first purpose-built unit for sex offenders.
Daniel Kelsall is a very unusual human being, not only for the crime he committed, but he'd accepted fairly early on in his life that he was gay. He'd had very, very limited sexual experiences.
That was until he went to prison. After his sentencing in 2015, Daniel was sent to a facility which accommodates at-risk prisoners who are considered to be at risk of suicide or self-harm.
He was also somewhat introverted, a geek, a nerd by his own description. Not terribly outgoing, not terribly sociable either. And I would imagine the sort of person who wouldn't socialise comfortably either.
Despite his awkwardness, Kelsall has found comfort among other killers.
The thing that was curious about him, and he was leading a very mundane life, working as a kitchen hand and cleaner at a food school in Sydney, out of Neutral Bay.
I predominantly wash dishes. I also sit, waiter, clean, prep, basic assistant work.
On the night of the 8th of September 2013, Daniel Kelsall finished his kitchen hand shift at hospitality school around midnight, while Huxley was being dropped outside the pub on his way back home from a party.
Daniel spotted him, and Daniel had allegedly been looking for victims beforehand, but he'd never done anything. He'd been contemplating, and I think he told his GP some years before that he had thought about killing people, so he's a weird little bugger. He had a knife in his bag from the cooking school that he was working at. He spots Huxley and thinks, and he waits. Morgan Huxley was just an average knockabout bloke, liked to drink obviously, very sociable. He worked as a maritime engineer on the waterfront of Sydney, I think at a nearby local wharf. Just an average sort of pleasant fella. Everyone liked him. He was a bloke who just enjoyed his life, lived it to the full. And he decides on the way back home, as many as have done in the past, I'll just have a quick one for the road.
Morgan went into a shop to grab some cash. Kelsall spotted him.
I walked into the convenience store where the person who I thought is sure this guy was trying to get money out of the machine. Very funny. I then had a small conversation. This guy, Morgan?
Yes, Morgan, yes.
Morgan asked me if I wanted to use the money, the ATM.
He asked you,
He asked me. I replied no and then left and walked down and started a conversation with the security guy.
Huxley leaves the convenience store with some cash, goes to the pub, reasonably attractive, barefoot, drunk, quite susceptible. And it made Morgan Huxley his target for that night. He was finally going to put his plans, his dreams, into action.
Coming up next, Daniel Kelsall seizes the opportunity to live out his murderous fantasy. It's late at night on September the 8th, 2013, and murderer Daniel Kelsall is stalking his barefoot victim, Morgan Huxley. CCTV captures Kelsall watching through the pub window as Huxley downs a nightcap.
There was evidence that he'd loitered around, he'd watched him, he'd followed him.
The CCTV cameras outside the pub and local convenience stores provide the evidence.
He sunk one beer and was out of the pub within 20 minutes.
We'd obtained CCTV video footage of a person leaving the hotel, and then we saw you following him. Do you agree with that? We told you that?
I was following him, but I did not need to follow him.
There are people who are really predatory stalkers, and so part of it is the hunt, and that's where that term predatory comes from. So that's the evidence in this case, is that he was very much on the hunt.
Why'd you jog?
It's cold. Mum always tells me if you're cold, go for a jog.
How far did you jog for?
Not very far.
It's now 1:30 a.m. Morgan's home is only a couple of 100 metres away.
He usually kept the front door unlocked. Apparently it was a habit of his. He goes in, goes to bed. Kelsall's been stalking him now for about half an hour or so. Kelsall gets to the front of the apartment building, finds the door is unlocked, gets inside. And we don't know whether it was before or after the murder, but he sexually assaults him. I take a punt that it might have actually been before, because what the police found later on was Kelsall's DNA on Morgan Huxley's penis, and a few other forensic markers Huxley is lying there on his bed and Kelsall just takes to him with a knife. They'd never met before, they had no social interaction before. He just goes there to kill him. I think he stabbed him around about 28 times. So that's frenzied, yes, repetitive, and I think he just enjoyed what he was doing.
So that's part of the predatory stalking, is on the hunt, ultimately wanting to see what it's like to kill someone.
Kelsall then leaves, just calmly takes the knife with him, which is never found, and wanders off. Morgan Huxley doesn't die immediately. 2:30, his flatmate hears this terrible noises next door, becomes very concerned about Morgan, goes inside to see what happens, opens the door, and there is Morgan Huxley sort of slumped. So for one horrible hour, Morgan Huxley's just been lying in his bedroom bleeding to death, unable to summon help. Just a terrible, terrible crime. Meanwhile, Daniel Kelsall was just calmly wandered off home.
Morgan is pronounced dead on arrival at a nearby hospital.
Daniel Kelsall was identified because that part of Sydney is, fortunately, there's a lot of CCTV, both convenience stores on the street and also from the pub. So they could actually see this young, nerdy-looking bloke with a bag, so he immediately became a suspect.
Police searched his home, gathering more evidence.
The name Kelsall on the back. Just with initials, DJK. So it's a small stain.
They hadn't found the murder weapon, but they'd found some of Morgan Huxley's blood on the bag that Daniel Kelsall had had that night, immediately pointing to him. They'd also found Kelsall's fingerprints at the crime scene, on the, I think from memory, the back of the door, or the doorknob, and they'd also found Daniel Kelsall's DNA on Morgan Huxley's penis.
And so, Kelsall's story changed again.
And his excuse was, well, in fact, they'd gone back to Huxley's house. They'd had consensual sex, which was interrupted by intruders. No idea how many intruders or how they got in or what they did, but the intruders came in, murdered Huxley, and Daniel Kelsall had run for his life, but had gone home and hadn't chosen to tell anyone about what had happened.
Police finally arrested Kelsall for the indecent assault and murder of Morgan Huxley.
Daniel Jack Kelsall arrives at court, ready to defend himself against charges of murder and indecent assault. The victim's flatmate, Jean Redmond, told the court she woke up to find Morgan with his pants down, gasping for air, with blood all around him on the floor and bloodstains on the sheet and bed. The jury will also hear Kelsall earlier confided in a psychiatrist that he'd thought of killing for the thrill of it, and that it would probably be a total random with a knife.
We've seen reports in the last couple of years that Kelsall has adapted very well into prison, and he's formed relationships with people, which was something he wasn't doing terribly comfortably outside prison, but he seemed to be embracing the lifestyle more vigorously than others. He was pretty exhausted most mornings. That's what happens, you know, it's a fact of life in prisons, particularly open-plan prisons where fraternising is far more straightforward.
Daniel was transferred to the Hunter Correctional Centre, one of Australia's newest maximum security prisons. And a whole new world opened up, along with the modern open plan design. And it appears Daniel Kelsall is thriving in prison.
And what we've seen in recent reports is he's sexually very, very busy in jail, both in demand and very demanding.
Condoms are actually given to prisoners. You can actually receive them, take them out of a vending machine, and lubricant as well. So it's accepted as being part of prison life.
Kelsall has a minimum of 30 years to contemplate his senseless act of violence. However, he's adapted quickly to his prison life. Kelsall has told prison guards he's fallen in love with a fellow murderer who stabbed his victim 105 times.
So he seems to have found a kindred spirit. So aside from his casual affairs with other people, he's bonded with this bloke, and he applied to become have their de facto relationship status formalised. I think corrective services declined to pay the fee, which is not unreasonable. Kelsall seems to be one of those rare people that seems to be thriving, at least to his expectations, in prison.
Kelsall's bid to have a de facto status declared may have been an attempt to stay where he was. He's since been transferred to Cessnock Correctional Centre and is eligible to apply for parole in January 2044.
In Kelsall's case, 30 years non-parole period, then 10 years on parole. If he does the 40, he'll walk out the door a free man. We can't touch him. There are some rare circumstances where the Supreme Court of New South Wales can decide to extend their sentence because the risk of reoffending is still significant.
Next, on Australia's most dangerous prisoners. Ever wondered how prisoners earn an income inside? Prepare to be surprised. Despite the impression that inmates are just locked up for most of their sentence, many inmates are given the opportunity to work, earning $30 to $60 a week, sometimes more. And you'd be surprised to know we're using prison-made products in our everyday lives.
So prison industry is a very important component of corrective services. While an inmate's in employment, there's less chance that they're getting up to illegal activities.
They spend their earnings on things like toiletries, phone calls, TV hire and food.
You can go and work in their workshops, and there's a lot of sewing goes on, and so a lot of overlock and stuff, and you might be making Woolworths aprons, or you might be sewing body bags. The really good jobs always go to pedophiles. They always get the good jobs because they're deemed as easy to control.
There are metal fabrication jobs like nuts and bolts for hardware stores, to carpentry jobs, baking, pet food, even making furniture for IKEA, as former inmate Kerry Tucker remembers all too well.
When I first went there, I was sanding IKEA chairs, and that's what you do all day.
Former bank robber John Killick learned to sew in Goulburn Jail.
I worked in a tailor shop, and most of the people I worked there were major criminals. The Kingsgrove Slasher taught me how to use a sewing machine. I used to make pyjamas.
Sweepers are employed in every prison.
The best jobs are the administrative or sweeper jobs in the jails. They're the most highest paying and can be paid up to $90 a week.
They maintain the cleanliness of the wings, the surgeries, they mop the floor, empty the garbage bins, they clean the wings and assist the wing to be maintained.
The lowest paying jobs are the more menial tasks, like sewing, laundry, furniture making, and packaging airline headsets.
Qantas or Emirates send all these headsets all bound together, and the women have to spend hours and hours untangling them.
50 headsets to a bag, like detangled, rewrapped, then you change the ear covers. It was like 50 cents a bag of 50. And to be honest, I could only get like 2 bags maybe done a day because it was very hard for me. Like, they come in big piles all tangled, and I was on struggle street.
20% of all earnings by prisoners is held in a compulsory savings account for when they are released. But if you're earning $1 a day, you won't save much.
You put 30 women in a shed that is, 45 degrees and ask them to untangle Qantas headphones without losing your temper. The nicest person is going to lose their shit.
Former prison officer Bella Gall would like to see more practical skills taught to prepare inmates for the outside world.
You need to upskill them, help them deal with emotions, help them deal with loss, help them deal with rejection, help them write a resume. Some of these guys get out, they go bang, 2 weeks, there's your crisis accommodation, here's your fucking Centrelink, and that's it.
And Russell Manser would like to see more rehab programs.
I had a drug problem. I didn't have a problem with an overlocker. I didn't need to get some overlocker skills so I can get out and whiz up a frock on a singer when I got out. I remember asking an officer that. I went to Lithgow Prison and he goes, "Oh, you got to work in the workshop." I said, "Hey, I just want to, is there anywhere I can do some work on this drug problem? Because it's serious, you know, I'm robbing banks." And he goes, "Mate, no, we're not doing that here." He said, "You either go into the workshops and work, or you get locked in your cell for 23 hours.
You expect prisons to be shrouded with a veil of hate and violence, but you don't expect a mother to be full of hate and violence toward her own little boy. So much so that she'd kill him, forced him inside a suitcase and thrown him in a pond. But that's exactly what Rachel Fitzner did, and it's why she's been behind bars since 2007.
Dean Shillingsworth was discarded like a piece of unwanted rubbish. He was discarded in full view of the public in a lake that would be discovered by people, an area that would be seen by the world.
Prisoner Rachel Fitzner was 26 when she murdered her 2-year-old son and was sent to Dilwinia Correctional Centre for Women in Windsor, about an hour from Sydney's centre. Fitzner is holed up with other violent offenders in the Boneyard, where inmates are under strict supervision, spending 23 out of 24 hours a day in their small, isolated compounds. In general population, she would be a high-risk target, but Fitzner doesn't back down, as those around her have discovered. She lashes out at fellow inmates and has been ordered not to intimidate, assault, or harass them. Her response? "I don't shout, I punch."
Rachel Fitzner's entire life was dysfunctional. She had dysfunctional role models. She had a dysfunctional upbringing and she had dysfunctional relationships throughout her entire life.
One of 7 children, she was physically abused by her father and kicked out of home at 17.
So Rachel Fitzner was a fairly young mother. She had her first child, a little girl, when she was just 19 years old. Met Paul Shillingsworth a couple of years later and had Dean with him. He went to prison and that relationship ended. And subsequently, she had a third child with a third partner, and that boy was only 6 months old when Dean was killed.
The mere sight of Dean made Fitzner angry.
Ultimately, she hated her son because he reminded her of her ex. He would be banished from the house. He'd be forced to forage for food sometimes if he was hungry, if he hadn't been fed. And neighbours would hear him saying, "Mummy, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And she would keep him outside. There had been 34 separate reports made to the Department of Community Services with fears for Dean's welfare based on her treatment of him. And we're talking about scratching, we're talking about hitting, depriving him of food. He would try to search for his own food and then she would punish him for that again and again.
The little 2.5-year-old was never going to win his mother's affection. But what happened next shocked a nation. Little Dean Shillingsworth had a miserable 2.5 years of life. His mother resented him, and he could never please her. Fitzner hated Dean's father, Paul Shillingsworth, way too much.
They always had a volatile relationship punctuated by a lot of domestic abuse and alcohol, lots of yelling, and that was known to everyone around their house.
Fitzner finally did what everyone feared.
They were visiting a friend when she instructed her son not to eat. Now, what parent tells their 2-year-old not to eat? He was hungry and the friend offered him a cheeseburger. This little boy accepted that, and incomprehensibly, that was the cause of his death.
Furious, she dragged her toddler home and went berserk.
His mum was so incensed that he'd taken food when he was hungry from a friend of hers, and she told him not to. She shook him to death.
And what she did next was just as cruel and unconscionable.
She murdered her son, put him in a suitcase, wheeled that suitcase in a pram to a lake at Ambervale in Sydney's southwestern suburbs, and just dumped him there like rubbish.
On the 17th of October 2007, 6 days after Dean was murdered and dumped, school children found him.
Then we saw that there was feet, so we ran up to our house and said to call the police.
Dean became known as the Lake Angel after his body was found in a suitcase dumped in a duck pond.
A sad little boy has been identified. It's believed the bag the 2-year-old boy was found in, shown on the news this week, led investigators to this address.
9 days after committing the violent crime, Rachel Fitzner was in custody and charged with murder.
In his little white coffin, Dean Shillingsworth, who they called Pretty Baby, the toddler so cruelly taken from his loved ones.
Fitzner admitted to shaking the baby to death.
The judge believed Fitzner's claim that she intended to shake Dean, not kill him, but he said she was callous and calculating because she lied to family and police in the hope Dean's body would never be found.
Rachel Fitzner is serving a 25.5-year sentence for murder. And the motive? Rage. In the boneyard, she's mixing with the sort of prisoners everyone in the prison system hates. A mix of sex offenders and women who have committed crimes against children. This is extreme isolation. James Todd, Daniel Kelsall and Rachel Fitzner are 3 of Australia's most dangerous prisoners. Cold-blooded killers with little regard for human life. 2 of them targeted complete strangers. Before murdering Eurydice Dixon, James Todd had spent at least 18 months fantasizing about killing someone. If he hadn't been caught, Professor James Ogloff believes he would have struck again.
There's this crescendo. They hit the high of actually doing it. Then there's a down period, and then it all starts again, and they really struggle not to sort of start to engage in that behavior again. So his appetite was just whetted, maybe not satisfied, and I think that's what I've seen in people who do repeated crimes, including serial killing.
Todd may be eligible for parole in 2053, when he's 54. Daniel Kelsall had been treated by psychiatrists in the weeks and years leading up to the murder of Morgan Huxley, a complete stranger.
The people who'd examined him in the past realised that he was a little unusual, but not showing signs of any mental illness, that level of instability that would cause you to think we need to do something. We need to intervene to make sure this young fella doesn't commit the crime, because not only is he fantasising about it, we also think he has the capacity to do it. So not mentally ill, just bad. Some people in this life are just born evil, and Daniel Kelsall was one of them.
As for Rachel Fitzner, there was nothing random about her choice of victim. Her 2-year-old son, Dean Shillingsworth.
This mother killed her little boy. She didn't just kill him, she did it slowly, and she did it with relish, all driven by an absolute hatred of the boy's father over 2 years.
Fitzner's 25.5-year sentence would have been higher if she hadn't pleaded guilty. She's eligible for parole in June 2027. Justice has been served.